Hi, Praggies. Welcome back to another episode of Pragmatic Optimists. I'm State Senator Tiara Mack, and I'm joined by Attorney Rachel Cohen. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share on the Legal AF platform. We are coming to you with an episode of what you can do if you are either in Chicago or another city that is under siege. There is a ton going on across our country, and sometimes it can be difficult to keep up with the headlines. That is the point, and that is their playbook, to flood the zone and make it to where we cannot feel like we have enough adequate information to address the issues that are happening, whether it is the National Guard being deployed to your city to pick up trash and clean up your streets and not actually address the crime that is happening in the country, or whether it is knowing your rights, knowing how to protect your neighbors, and come together in solidarity with mutual aid and to uplift the voices that stand to lose the most if this authoritarian regime continues unchecked in our current moment. So I have a couple of questions for you, Rachel. You are currently in Chicago. You have also been traveling back and forth between DC and a host of other places with your busy schedule. But what do you see as the most important thing for residents currently in any city across the country, whether it is LA, Chicago, DC, Baltimore, potentially Boston, to watch out for and to look for in their communities and with their neighbors to keep themselves safe and informed?
I must own that I am actually currently in DC today, but I will be back in Chicago. I was in Chicago yesterday and we'll be back in Chicago in 2 days, so close enough. But I think that even beyond just the number one thing that people should be doing on the ground is figuring out how to plug into local level resistance. And I think that I am reluctant to point people to Meta, but I think that a lot of people on the left don't point people to like imperfect sources for information distribution because of things like very legitimate concerns about security, but then we just don't point people anywhere and they don't know where to get any information. So in Chicago, there is a website and Instagram account being run by a coalition of community organizations called Hands Off Chicago. So it's handsoffchicago.com or it's handsoff_Chicago. But I think that even if your city is not currently under siege and thus those resources or coalitions may not yet exist, the coalition members of Hands Off are longtime advocates within the city of Chicago. It's being led by organized labor, right? And the AFL-CIO and Chicago labor unions, as well as the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, which is a longstanding coalition with a number of different, as it sounds, immigration organizations. And these people already had social media accounts. And those kinds of social media accounts or newsletters or other forms of kind of call to action distribution are a fantastic place to start, because one of the reasons that Chicago's resistance has been so effective is that it was proactive as opposed to reactive. Something that I am extremely proud of is that there was a decision in certain autonomous kind of grassroots organizing groups to step up pressure on a facility called the Broadview Detention Center, the Broadview ICE Processing Facility. It's not supposed to be a detention center, though they're using it as one, about 2 weeks ago. And then a week later, after these demonstrations were kind of already in the works because of the proactive decision, it was announced that that was going to be used as the main processing center for Donald Trump ramping up immigration enforcement in the city. And so I think not waiting until some kind of bright line is crossed, the bright line has been crossed, whether it's in your city or not. Donald Trump tried to federalize the guard in California and then threatened to do it multiple other places while there was a judge's order telling him that he couldn't do it. Like, the line has been crossed. And so the question of what can I do? What should I do? You don't necessarily need to go out and do something tomorrow, but you should be planning as if this is coming to your city, because it is. And if you are already organized in that way, as I think Hands Off very clearly was, because they were able to get websites up and able to get huge calls to action together on a dime, that is going to be what it takes to effectively stand up to the Trump administration, is proactive organizing as opposed to constantly being on our heels.
Nice. And Rachel, in addition to proactive organizing, which takes a lot of energy and effort, and not everyone's access point will be being on the front lines. And I want to make sure that at the end of this conversation, we give a couple of tiered options for people to engage in, because everyone's place is not on the front lines. Whether you have a direct risk to your employment, to your family's status, to your safety, your physical safety, your mental safety, there are so many other ways to plug in and to find information. Like you said, there's no perfect system, but we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good, which is fighting back against these atrocities. What are some other rights or things that people should keep centered? I have my like flashcards right here of like, okay, if America is going to be under siege and it comes to a city near me, I want to make sure I know my First Amendment rights, my Fourth Amendment rights, my Fifth Amendment rights. What are the things that people can prepare themselves for in their neighborhoods without having to leave their communities? And where can they find information about how safe is it to attend a protest? What can I do in my streets and in my city if I see an officer? Maybe I'm not going to throw a ham sandwich at them, but maybe I will record them or I will document interactions. What are some of the other tools that people on the ground every day at the grocery store can do with their cell phones, with their community members, on their social media to highlight and keep themselves safe?
Recording is, I think, one of the most important things that you can do, though I will nay, and you have a First Amendment right to record both police officers and ICE agents, as long as you are not interfering with their activities in that moment. So if you notice or see someone that is getting disappeared, it's also going to be important to call out to people and ask them for their name or their date of birth or a number so that their family can find them. But even that, I think, comes with a degree of confrontation that some people are not comfortable with, understandably, particularly if they are visibly non-white, because we are seeing this kind of enforcement waged specifically against people who are Latin, and I think in DC as well against Black community members. And so that's not at all me saying, oh, and only do it if you're white, but it is just their legitimate concerns that many people have in those situations. I think that it does come with an obligation if you are white to record, to document, because you are protected in this way that many of your neighbors are not. And I also will just say to any white woman in particular that has ever thought to themselves, like, I am so powerless, I'm so unsafe, I must call the police for this reason. What will actually make you feel powerful is recording the cops and seeing how they react to being recorded in that way, because it's the most powerful I've ever felt. It's like the whole posture changes. The whole way that they're interacting with the people that are under arrest changes. And I think that watching that happen will not only make you feel very powerful, but will also be a good reminder as to why it is not, in fact, good praxis to deploy police on your neighbors. I think that even lower risk activities, there's lots of need for flyering with information about rights. There's lots of information online related to immigrants' rights. And if you Google red cards, there's a ton of different resources on, I think it's called like the immigrant, let me just look it up. It's on the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. They have a ton of different resources that you can print out, that you can put up around your city. There's lots of even just graphics saying like ICE keep out. In Chicago, one of the big calls to action is to print off hands off Chicago signs and have them up in everybody's windows so that the visual is very powerful of Donald Trump is not wanted nor welcome here, nor are the feds. And so I think that those things are very, very helpful. I think that when there are protests, there's lots of need always for waters to be brought, especially if they are more ongoing protests. And I think just educating oneself about lessons out of the 2020 George Floyd protests in terms of what made organizing sustainable for people, educating oneself, reading Miriam Kaba, reading Kelly Hayes, reading organizers that put out how-to guides. That's one of my absolute favorite things I've ever read. Because what ends up happening is when things come to people's cities, the number of DMs that I have right now of people asking baseline, like, what do I do questions. I am so happy to see people activated and involved, but I also want to gently for those of you that are not in Chicago, DC, LA, say that that's work is supposed to happen before Donald Trump gets to your city. And so if you have the time to do that work now, you need to take it. You need to take it.
And Rachel, you had a great essay that you posted on the Legal AF Substack. And it was this really great call to action of not just like, what can we be doing, but get uncomfortable with the things that you're not used to doing. These are unprecedented times, and we cannot treat this moment as business as usual. So if you have never opened up a book or read a zine that is directly related to organizing or to this current moment in history and how these actions have been taken before, whether you're reading about Kent State, whether you're reading about what has happened in the 60s with the civil rights movement, whether you're reading about other uprisings in the 1890s, these are some things that I encourage you to do. Do the uncomfortable thing and do the brave thing that fits your current situation. And so you talked a lot about some of the stuff that you've done. You've done mutual aid. You've been on the front lines. You've also visited an ICE facility and prevented some people from getting inside. But I want people to not focus on what can you do that you see as like the sexy social media action. We're not asking everyone to make the sexiest hard-hitting sign. We're asking people to find what makes sense for you. Create a reading group of your neighbors. One of the most poignant things, and I'm going to be reading this book soon called Bowling Alone, is we've lost so much community. And one thing that makes me so proud to see cities like Chicago and LA and DC come together in masses is that people are now finding homes and talking to people who finally get it. The social media can be a void where you like, you post, you share, but you're not engaging with your neighbors. And what does it mean for my unhoused neighbors to watch other unhoused people or people who are living in precarious living situations have the government come to their front doors or to their tent doors and threaten their very livelihoods when they're already afraid? What does it mean to have neighbors who are undocumented or who have mixed status families who came to this country for a better life and to be afraid to leave their homes for days on end? What does it mean to watch our trans brothers and sisters live under constant government threat for their rights and their livelihoods? And then how can we bring that conversation to ensuring that everyone has a meal, whether it's through things like Foods Not Bomb, whether it's other mutual aid acts, buying groceries for that family, making sure that family that has now lost income because of their status or because of the threats in their community or job loss, getting them the food that they need or bringing them to a food pantry so that they can use the resources there. I think another important thing that folks can do, and I'll ask you for some other hot tips which you've laid out, is yes, follow those social media accounts, but follow the newsletter of your elected officials. I saw that Congresswoman Duckworth was posting and sharing and was interviewed by CBS. There were other Illinois congressional people. Follow those people. Follow your local leaders. There are tons of aldermen in Chicago. Follow their social media. See what they are highlighting. What actions are they taking at the local level? Local Chicago police is also governed by the city of Chicago. So the city council appropriates that budget and will also hold those people accountable if they do, in fact, found to be working with ICE. So it is important to know, what are your local elected officials saying? What is your mayor saying? What are your state elected officials saying? And then what is the federal government saying? And that only comes typically with following their newsletters. Also, go to your library. Some really great organizing and resources happens in public spaces like libraries and parks. If you see a sign that you want to know more information about, get that QR code. Start putting up information in your own neighborhoods. Utilize things like free libraries and free resources in your community. It takes all of us doing what little we can, and it's not little because I don't want to discount someone who is simply patronizing their library or who is going to a food bank or who is driving someone to and from work because they have a fear of deportation. But every small action is important. And I don't think now is the time for people to discount doing something every day, because in 50 years, when the history books are rewriting this moment in time, I don't want anyone to cower away from their grandchildren who've inherited a beautiful world, who've inherited a world where democracy is stronger than it is today, where they've inherited inherited social infrastructure that treats every single person with dignity and respect and honors their rights to a life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I don't want you to have to say you did absolutely nothing. You shared a meme, you shared a social media post, and you signed a petition. I want you to say that you created beautiful neighborhood gardens. I want you to say that you read more. I want you to say that you met your neighbors. And I want you to say maybe that you were on the front lines, or that you raised your hand to run for office, or that you helped someone run for office. So Rachel, as we wrap up, because I know we're getting close to time, what are you hopeful for, and what are you hoping that people will find either as resources, as community building tools, and as resistance tools in Chicago and in other cities that could likely see the same action we're seeing across our country?
I think what's keeping me really hopeful in the city of Chicago is that it is so clear that the resistance here is rooted in liberatory ideology, and that it is not, that's why it's been so proactive as opposed to reactive. It's that it is rooted in the knowledge that our system is deeply broken and has been for a very long time, and that we are working towards liberation, not from Donald Trump, but liberation for everyone. And so we're seeing centering in Chicago of partnership with, or really active partnership with, Palestinian rights groups. We're seeing partnership and work that is building upon very, very active decarceration, kind of anti-policing or anti-police brutality work that has been going on in the city of Chicago for decades. Miriam Kaba and Kelly Hayes, whose book you just lifted up, document extensive organizing in the city of Chicago, where at the time Miriam was based, and I believe where Kelly still is. And so we're seeing the reason that it's working is because people do not feel that it is a struggle for the moment of pushing back against the Trump administration, but instead that this is a moment in which we are called to really do the kind of work that you just listed, of getting to know our neighbors, building a community that takes care of itself and that does not need violent intervention by the state. Brandon Johnson and also Brandon Scott in Baltimore have been really focused on funding community-based interventions. And that's why crime is so down in both Chicago and Baltimore. There's actually in the Forbes article about America's quiet safety revolution that we've been talking about. I was rereading it recently as I was thinking about things I wanted to highlight in the city of Chicago. And there's a note that crime is down at a time when police are having the most difficulty filling vacancies in their police departments in the last several decades. And it just felt to me that if you had identified anything else that was so strongly that was so deeply rooted in notions of public safety and also so strongly correlated with decrease in crime, that it would be headlines everywhere that we figured out how to fix the crime problem, because when there are more vacancies in police departments, there is less crime. But of course, it's not going to be framed that way, because that's not the frame that America has on the whole, and particularly in corporate media when we talk about what actually makes communities safer. And I just think I'd never want to lose sight of the fact that even in this moment, when there's all of these kind of effective organizing happening and victories, there are still people getting disappeared off of the streets. And there are more of them because of this ramp up in ICE enforcement than there have been historically. And so that should also stay top of mind for all of us. As we do so, I think that centering real liberation for our neighbors and our communities in our organizing is what is going to be effective and successful, because when we misdiagnose Donald Trump's attacks on American cities as an anomaly in the American system, as opposed to the natural conclusion of building out militarized police forces that are descended from slave patrols and having politicians unwilling to name those disparate impacts, and instead every single time there's crime in the United States, politicians of both parties coming in and saying that we need to put more Black people in jail, whether in so many words or in their actions. That frame, understanding that context, is the only way that we're going to be successful. And what keeps me hopeful is seeing leaders that seem to really, and a community that really seems to understand that frame.
Yes. Well, Thank you, Rachel. I'm sure we're going to continue following what's happening in Chicago and DC. There is going to be a lot happening, but we are your Praggies, your Praggy buddies who are going to help you navigate these uncertain times with a little bit of optimism. So thanks again for joining. We are Pragmatic Optimists. You can follow us on our individual social media platforms, Cohen.489 and at Mack District 6 on all social media. Thanks, Praggies.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.